The Zephyrian war fleet hung in space like a cluster of metallic death, each ship bristling with weapons that could crack planets. Admiral Vexhai stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the pale blue world turning slowly below. His forearms flexed with anticipation, claws extending and retracting in rhythm with his excitement. For 3,000 years, his species had carved a bloody path across the galaxy, and no world had ever survived their attention. Earth would be no different. The intelligence reports painted humans as a primitive species, barely out of their home system. They had discovered faster-than-light travel only 50 years ago, while the Zephyrians had been masters of the void for millennia. The humans had no energy shields, no plasma cannons, no psionic warfare capabilities. They were insects waiting to be crushed. "Begin the descent," Vexhai commanded, his voice a low growl that made his bridge crew shiver. The Zephyrians communicated through a combination of sound and pheromone release, and his current scent cocktail radiated pure, predatory hunger. "I want to see the terror in their eyes before we begin the harvest." The fleet of 50 dreadnoughts broke formation, each ship the size of a small city. They moved with the practiced efficiency of apex predators, having performed this dance of destruction countless times before. As they entered Earth's atmosphere, their hulls began to glow with re-entry heat, creating artificial meteors that streaked across the morning sky. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of Luna Station, watching the alien fleet approach through her telescope. She had been monitoring deep space communications for months, part of humanity's early warning system. The intercepted transmissions had been automatically translated by their quantum computers, revealing the approaching threat with chilling clarity. The Zephyrians were not coming to trade or negotiate. They were coming to hunt. "How long until they reach population centers?" asked General Morrison, his weathered face grim as he studied the tactical displays. 18 hours, Sarah replied, adjusting her glasses. "Their lead ships are already entering the upper atmosphere over the Pacific." Around them, the station buzzed with frantic activity. Military personnel coordinated with governments worldwide, while scientists worked desperately to understand the alien technology. The few defense satellites humanity possessed were already being targeted by advanced jamming systems, their weapons useless against the invaders' superior shielding. "What about the evacuation protocols?" Morrison asked. "Where can 8 billion people evacuate to?" Sarah responded quietly. "These things have faster-than-light travel. Nowhere in the solar system is safe." The first Zephyrian dropships touched down in the Australian outback, their massive forms crushing ancient rocks beneath adamantine landing claws. The ships were organic in design, looking more like enormous beetles than traditional spacecraft. Steam rose from their biomechanical hulls as they adapted to Earth's atmosphere. From within these ships emerged the Zephyrians themselves, and they were the stuff of nightmares. Standing 3 meters tall on 4 powerful legs, their torso supported 4 arms ending in razor claws. Their heads resembled those of giant praying mantises with compound eyes that could track dozens of targets simultaneously. Most terrifying of all were their mandibles, designed to tear through armor and bone with equal ease. The first human settlement they encountered was a small mining town called Copper Ridge. Population: 347 souls, who had no idea they were about to become the opening act of humanity's greatest test. Jake Patterson was fixing his truck when the shadow fell across his garage. He looked up to see what he initially thought was a strange aircraft hovering overhead. It wasn't until the thing landed and began moving on multiple legs that his brain finally processed what he was seeing. "Mary!" he called to his wife, his voice surprisingly calm despite the impossible sight before him. "You might want to see this." The Zephyrian warrior stalked forward, its compound eyes fixed on the human male. This was always Vexhai's favorite part of a new conquest. the moment when the prey species first understood their fate. The delicious terror, the desperate scrambling, the futile attempts at resistance before inevitable submission. But Jake Patterson did something unexpected. He smiled. It wasn't a nervous smile or a confused smile. It was the easy, confident smile of someone genuinely pleased to meet a new neighbor. He wiped his greasy hands on his coveralls and walked forward with the casual gait of a man approaching a friend. "Well, hello there," Jake said, his voice carrying the warm drawl of rural Australia. "That's quite a ride you've got. Never seen anything like it." The Zephyrian warrior stopped mid-stride, its mandibles clicking in confusion. In 3,000 years of conquest, this had never happened. Prey species ran, fought, cowered, or screamed. They did not approach with what appeared to be genuine friendliness. The warrior's pheromone sensors detected no fear from the human. Instead, they picked up curiosity, mild excitement, and something the Zephyrian's brain struggled to identify: genuine warmth. "I'm Jake," the human continued, extending his hand in what the warrior's cultural database identified as a gesture of greeting. "Jake Patterson, you picked a good day to visit. Mary just made fresh bread, and we've got beer cooling in the creek." The warrior's forearms trembled slightly. This was not following the script. The human should be running, screaming, begging for mercy. Instead, he was offering hospitality. More Zephyrians emerged from the dropship, their weapons trained on the small cluster of buildings. They had expected to find cowering humans, easy pickings for the harvest. Instead, they found Jake Patterson waving them over like he was greeting old friends at a barbecue. "Mary!" Jake called again. "We've got company." A woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on an apron. She looked at the alien warriors for a moment, then smiled just as warmly as her husband. "My goodness," she said, her voice full of wonder rather than terror. "Look at you beautiful creatures. You must have traveled such a long way. Are you hungry?" The lead warrior's mind reeled. Beautiful creatures. In 1,000 conquests, his species had been called many things: monsters, demons, nightmares made flesh. Never beautiful, never greeted with concern for their welfare. "Jake, get them some of the good chairs from inside," Mary continued, bustling about with the efficiency of a born hostess. "They look tired." Word spread quickly through Copper Ridge. Within an hour, the entire town had gathered around the alien dropship. But instead of the mob of terrified humans the Zephyrians expected, they found themselves surrounded by curious neighbors offering food, asking questions about their journey, and marveling at their spacecraft with the enthusiasm of children at a science fair. Old Pete Morrison brought his acoustic guitar and started playing folk songs. The Hendricks family arrived with a full picnic spread. Children peered at the aliens with wide-eyed wonder, asking if they wanted to see their pet rabbits or hear about their school projects. The Zephyrian warriors stood in their combat formation, weapons ready, mandibles clicking with confusion. Their pheromone communications had devolved into chaos as each warrior tried to report the impossible situation to their superiors. One small human female, no more than 7 years old, approached the lead warrior with the fearless curiosity unique to children. She held up a drawing she had made with crayons, a crude but enthusiastic depiction of stick figures and bug-like creatures holding hands under a smiling sun. "I drew you," she announced proudly. "Daddy says you're from space. That's so cool. Do you want to be friends?" The warrior looked down at the drawing, then at the small human's expectant face. In that moment, something fundamental shifted in his understanding of the universe. For 3,000 years, his species had encountered fear, hatred, and desperation. They had built their entire culture around the concept of conquest through terror. But terror was a two-way street. And for the first time in his long life, the Zephyrian warrior realized he was the one who was afraid. Back in orbit, Admiral Vexhai paced his bridge in growing agitation. The reports from the surface made no sense. His warriors were describing scenarios that defied everything the Zephyrians knew about conquest. Humans were not fleeing. They were not fighting. They were socializing? "Contact the ground team," he ordered, his claws leaving grooves in the metal deck plating. "I want a full tactical assessment immediately." The response that came back would haunt him for the rest of his days. It was from his most experienced warrior, a veteran of 50 planetary conquests, and his voice carried an emotion no Zephyrian warrior should ever display: uncertainty. "Admiral," the warrior's voice crackled through the communicator. "Request immediate tactical guidance. The humans they're offering to teach us their music." Vexahai's mandibles clicked in disbelief. "Repeat that transmission." "Sir, they want to know if we'd like to learn to play guitar. Also, there's a small human who has drawn pictures of us, and an elder who wishes to share what he calls the good whiskey. I don't know how to respond, sir." For the first time in his military career, Admiral Vexhai was speechless. Below him, a planet of 8 billion humans continued about their daily lives, unaware that their fate hung in the balance. But in a small mining town in Australia, something unprecedented was happening. Humanity was doing what it did best, turning strangers into friends, one smile at a time. The invasion of Earth had begun, but it was not proceeding according to any plan ever devised. In the gathering twilight of Copper Ridge, alien warriors sat around a campfire listening to human folk songs, while children drew pictures of spacecraft and elderly humans shared stories of their own adventures among the stars of imagination. And somewhere in the darkness between worlds, the concept of conquest itself began to tremble. News of the events at Copper Ridge spread across the world faster than the Zephyrian fleet could deploy. Social media exploded with images and videos of alien warriors sitting awkwardly on human furniture, their massive forms dwarfing the folding chairs while elderly humans explained the finer points of barbecue sauce. Dr. Sarah Chen watched the footage from Luna Station with growing amazement. She had studied xenobiology for 15 years, theorizing about first contact scenarios, but nothing in her training had prepared her for this. The aliens that had terrified governments worldwide were now learning to play checkers with retired coal miners. "This is impossible," General Morrison muttered, staring at a live feed showing a Zephyrian warrior carefully holding a human infant while the mother explained proper burping techniques. "These things were supposed to be unstoppable killing machines." "Maybe that's the problem," Sarah replied thoughtfully. "Maybe they've been unstoppable for so long they forgot how to handle being stopped by something other than superior firepower." The phenomenon was spreading. As more Zephyrian dropships landed across the globe, they encountered the same bewildering response. In rural Kenya, Maasai elders welcomed the aliens with traditional ceremonies, presenting them with handcrafted jewelry and inviting them to witness ancient dances. In the mountains of Nepal, Sherpa guides offered to show them the best climbing routes, assuming these magnificent creatures must appreciate a good adventure. In downtown Tokyo, the landing of a massive Zephyrian dreadnought in Shibuya Crossing had caused the expected panic for about 10 minutes. Then, as humans began returning to observe the aliens, something extraordinary happened. Street vendors started offering food to the confused warriors. Teenagers asked for selfies. An elderly man began teaching one particularly bewildered Zephyrian the proper way to bow respectfully. Commander Kethva had led the Tokyo assault with full confidence. Her battalion was equipped with the latest neural disruptors and bioweapons designed to subdue planetary populations in a matter of hours. Instead, she found herself standing in the world's busiest intersection, surrounded by humans who seemed more interested in her cultural background than her capacity for violence. "Excuse me," said a young woman in business attire, approaching with a smartphone in hand. I hope you don't mind me asking, but that armor is absolutely stunning. Is it grown or manufactured? I'm a materials engineer, and I've never seen anything like the way it seems to adapt to your movement. Kethva's translator worked overtime to process the flood of technical questions. The human wasn't fleeing or cowering. She was conducting an impromptu scientific interview. More humans gathered around, their questions ranging from propulsion systems to the mathematical principles behind their faster-than-light navigation. Within hours, Shibuya Crossing had transformed into an open-air scientific conference, with Zephyrian warriors finding themselves reluctant participants in humanity's insatiable curiosity about the universe. Back on the flagship, Admiral Vex-High faced a crisis unlike any in Zephyrian military history. His invasion force was scattered across the planet, but they weren't conquering. They were being absorbed into human society with terrifying efficiency. "Status report from Brazil," announced his communications officer, her voice tight with confusion. "Go ahead." "Sir, our forces they've been invited to a football match. The humans are teaching them the rules. Commander Yex-High reports that his warriors are enthusiastic about the sport." Vex-High's forearms clenched into fists. "What about the European deployment?" "The situation is complex, sir. Our forces in England are currently participating in what the humans call afternoon tea. In France, they're being introduced to wine tasting. In Germany, there's been some kind of cultural exchange involving beer brewing techniques. And the military resistance? Surely their armed forces are mounting some kind of defense?" The communications officer hesitated. "Sir, their military personnel are helping with translation. They've set up liaison offices to facilitate better communication between our forces and civilian populations." Vex-High turned to stare out at the blue planet below. In 1,000 conquests, he had never encountered anything like this. Species fell into predictable patterns when faced with superior force. They fought, they surrendered, or they fled. None of them had ever responded with dinner invitations. "Sir," another officer approached cautiously, "we're receiving communication requests from the human governments. They're inviting you to what they call a diplomatic dinner at their United Nations facility." "A trap?" "Unknown, sir. They're requesting that you bring whatever dietary requirements your species might have. They want to ensure, and I quote, proper hospitality for our distinguished visitors from the stars." Meanwhile, on the surface, the impossible integration continued. In a small cafe in Paris, a Zephyrian warrior named Kexatai sat across from an elderly French chef named Henri, learning about the philosophy behind fine cooking. The alien's compound eyes tracked every movement as Henri demonstrated the proper way to fold pasta, his weathered hands moving with practiced grace. "You see, mon ami," Henri explained in his heavily accented English, "cooking is not just about sustenance. It is about love, about bringing people together, about sharing the best of what we have." Kextai's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. In Zephyrian culture, food was fuel, consumed efficiently and without ceremony. But watching Henri work, seeing the care and passion the human put into every dish, something stirred in the warrior's chest, something that felt suspiciously like wonder. "Why do you show kindness to strangers?" Kextai asked, his voice modulated through the universal translator. "You know nothing of my intentions or capabilities." Henri paused in his cooking, considering the question with the seriousness it deserved. "Because that is what humans do," he said simply. "We believe that anyone willing to sit at our table and share a meal cannot be wholly evil. Food has a way of making us all the same. We all hunger, we all need nourishment, we all find comfort in good company." Similar scenes played out across the globe. In a research station in Antarctica, scientists shared their findings about climate change with Zephyrian environmental specialists, leading to unexpected conversations about planetary stewardship. In a refugee camp in Jordan, humans who had lost everything still found ways to welcome the alien visitors, offering what little they had with the same generous spirit that had sustained them through their own hardships. The breakthrough moment came in an unexpected place, a children's hospital in Mexico City. Commander Zethkar had landed there expecting to find an easy target for psychological warfare. Instead, she encountered something that shattered her understanding of power. The human medical staff, instead of fleeing, had rushed to their patients, creating a protective barrier around the most vulnerable. But then something extraordinary happened. A young doctor named Maria Santos approached Zethkar with tears in her eyes. "Please," she said, her voice breaking with desperation and hope. "If your technology is advanced enough for interstellar travel, surely you understand medicine. I have children here who are dying from diseases we cannot cure. Can you help them?" Zethkar stood frozen. In 3,000 years of conquest, no one had ever asked the Zephyrians for help. They were feared, respected for their power, but never viewed as potential healers. The doctor's plea struck something deep within the warrior's psyche, the part of her that remembered why her species had first reached for the stars. The Zephyrians had not always been conquerors. Millennia ago, they had been explorers, scientists, beings who sought to understand the cosmos and their place within it. Somewhere along the way, they had allowed their power to corrupt their purpose, transforming from seekers of knowledge into agents of destruction. Zethkar began, then stopped. She activated her communicator. "Medical Bay, this is Commander Zethkar. I need a full bioanalysis team deployed to my location immediately." Within hours, Zephyrian medical technology was being applied to human patients. Diseases that had puzzled human doctors for decades were analyzed and understood within minutes. Children who had been dying began to recover. And in the process, something fundamental shifted in both species. The humans weren't just being friendly. They were offering the Zephyrians something the warrior race had forgotten they were capable of receiving: purpose beyond destruction. The chance to use their advanced capabilities for creation rather than annihilation. Word of the medical miracles spread quickly through the Zephyrian fleet. Warriors who had spent centuries perfecting the art of causing death found themselves learning the art of preserving life. The same technology that had been used to analyze enemy weaknesses was now being used to understand human genetics and develop cures for previously incurable conditions. Admiral Vexhai received reports from across the globe that read more like cultural exchange programs than military operations. His forces weren't conquering Earth. They were being conquered by humanity's relentless compassion, curiosity, and hospitality. The final straw came when a 10-year-old girl named Emma Thompson from Manchester sent him a handwritten letter, delivered through official diplomatic channels. In crayon and careful handwriting, she had written, "Dear Mr. Alien Admiral, my teacher says you're very far from home and might be lonely. Would you like to come to my birthday party next week? We're having chocolate cake and my mum makes the best in all of England. Also, I would like to hear stories about space. Love, Emma, P.S. Do you like ponies?" Vexhai held the letter in his claws, reading it over and over. In all his years of military service, he had received battle reports, tactical assessments, and surrender documents, but never an invitation to a birthday party, never a simple expression of concern for his well-being from a member of a species he had come to conquer. The letter represented everything his species had lost in their march toward galactic dominance: innocence, trust, the belief that strangers could become friends if given the chance. For the first time in 1,000 years, Admiral Vexhai began to wonder if the Zephyrians had been conquering the wrong things all along. The United Nations General Assembly had never hosted anything quite like this. The vast hall buzzed with nervous energy as delegates from every nation on Earth prepared to meet formally with Admiral Vexhai and his senior commanders. Security was minimal, not because the threat was considered low, but because the past week had proven that traditional defensive measures were unnecessary. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the podium, having been chosen as humanity's primary spokesperson due to her work in xenobiology and her role in first detecting the Zephyrian fleet. She looked out at the assembled crowd, humans on one side, towering alien warriors on the other, and somehow the scene felt more like a cultural festival than a military negotiation. "Admiral Vex High," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the translation systems both species had worked together to perfect over the past week. "Before we begin formal proceedings, I believe there's something important we need to address." The Admiral, who had finally descended from his flagship to attend this unprecedented gathering, stood nearly 3 meters tall even while attempting what his cultural attachés had taught him was a respectful posture. His 4 arms were positioned in what Zephyrians considered a diplomatic stance, though his compound eyes continuously scanned the room with military precision. "Speak," he said, his voice a careful modulation of the growls and clicks that served as his natural communication method. "We need to talk about Emma Thompson's birthday party," Sarah said with a slight smile. "She's quite disappointed that you haven't responded to her invitation, and I'm told she's prepared a special song about space travel just for you." A ripple of laughter ran through the human delegation. Even some of the Zephyrian warriors clicked their mandibles in what their species considered amusement. The Admiral's massive head tilted slightly, a gesture he had learned from humans that indicated confusion mixed with curiosity. "You wish to discuss a juvenile human celebration in these proceedings?" "Admiral," said Secretary General Rodriguez, stepping forward with the easy confidence of a career diplomat, "I think you're beginning to understand something important about humanity. We don't separate our formal relationships from our personal ones. When a 10-year-old girl invites someone to her birthday party, we consider that a matter of genuine diplomatic importance." This was the moment that truly broke Admiral Vex High's remaining resistance to human logic. He had commanded fleets that could obliterate solar systems, led campaigns across hundreds of worlds, and inspired terror in countless species. But somehow, a small human child's birthday invitation had become a matter of interplanetary diplomacy. "Very well," he said, his translator carefully modulating his tone to convey what humans would interpret as bemused acceptance. "Please inform Emma Thompson that I would be honored to attend her celebration." The applause that erupted was unlike anything the Zephyrians had ever experienced. Not the fearful submission they had grown accustomed to, nor the desperate approval of subjugated populations, but genuine joy at a social connection being made. Over the following hours, the formal meeting evolved into something unprecedented in galactic history, a genuine cultural exchange between species. The humans presented their history, their achievements, their struggles, and their hopes for the future. They spoke of art and music, of scientific discovery and philosophical inquiry, of their dreams of peaceful contact with other intelligent life. In return, the Zephyrians found themselves sharing stories of their own ancient past before the conquests began. They spoke of their homeworld, a place of incredible beauty that they had not seen in centuries. They talked about their original mission to explore and catalog the wonders of the universe, and how that noble purpose had somehow become corrupted into an endless cycle of domination. Commander Kethva, who had initially led the assault on Tokyo, stood before the assembly and delivered what would later be considered one of the most important speeches in galactic history. "For 3,000 Earth years," she said, her voice carrying the weight of millennium of regret, "my people have believed that strength could only be demonstrated through conquest. We have taken worlds, harvested resources, and subjugated populations because it was the only way we knew to prove our worth in the universe." She paused, her compound eyes focusing on the human delegates. "But in the past week, you have shown us something we had forgotten. that true strength lies not in the ability to destroy, but in the choice to create, not in inspiring fear, but in offering friendship. We came here as conquerors, and you have somehow transformed us into, what is your word? Guests. Dr. Chen stepped forward. There's something else you need to understand about humans, Commander. We don't just make guests into friends, we make friends into family. The negotiations that followed were unlike any in the recorded history of either species. Instead of surrender terms or territorial agreements, the discussions focused on collaboration, mutual aid, and the establishment of what would become known as the Terran-Zephyrian Alliance. The Zephyrians offered their advanced technology, medical systems that could eliminate disease, energy sources that could power civilizations without environmental damage, transportation methods that could open the entire galaxy to exploration. In return, humans offered something the Zephyrians had thought was worthless, but proved to be invaluable: the social and cultural technologies that made peaceful coexistence possible. Human diplomats, teachers, artists, and philosophers were invited to travel to Zephyrian worlds, not as captives or curiosities, but as partners in rebuilding a civilization that had lost its way. Zephyrian warriors began training not just in combat techniques, but in peacekeeping, disaster relief, and what humans called community building. The transformation was not without its challenges. Some Zephyrian factions, hardened by millennia of military culture, struggled to accept the new paradigm. Some human governments remained suspicious of their former invaders' intentions. But the momentum of change had become unstoppable. The breakthrough came 6 months later, at Emma Thompson's actual birthday party. Admiral Vexhai attended as promised, arriving in a specially modified shuttle that landed in the park behind Emma's home in Manchester. The sight of the massive alien warrior carefully removing himself from his spacecraft, wearing what appeared to be a hand-knitted scarf that Emma's grandmother had made especially for him, became one of the most widely circulated images in human history. The party itself was everything a 10-year-old could have hoped for. Admiral Vexhai proved surprisingly adept at party games, his forearms giving him a significant advantage at pin the tail on the donkey. He listened with rapt attention as Emma explained the plot of her favorite animated movies, and even attempted to sing along with the birthday song, his deep harmonics adding an otherworldly beauty to the simple melody. But the moment that changed everything came when Emma opened her presents. Among the toys and books and games was a small, carefully wrapped package from the Admiral. Inside was something that had never been seen before in the galaxy, a Zephyrian artwork created not for intimidation or conquest, but simply to bring joy to a child. It was a crystalline sculpture that captured light and transformed it into dancing patterns of color. Beautiful, intricate, and clearly crafted with enormous care and skill. As Emma held it up to the light, her face illuminated by the rainbow patterns it cast, every adult in attendance realized they were witnessing history being made. "It's beautiful," Emma whispered, then looked up at the towering alien who had traveled across the galaxy to attend her party. "Thank you for being my friend." In that moment, Admiral Vexhai understood something that had eluded his species for 3,000 years. Conquest was not about taking what others had. True conquest was about giving something so valuable that others wanted to share their lives with you. The video of Emma's birthday party was broadcast across the galaxy, transmitted by Zephyrian communication networks to worlds that had lived in terror of the warrior race for millennia. It showed something those worlds had never imagined possible: Zephyrian soldiers not as instruments of destruction, but as protectors, teachers, and friends. Within a year, the Galactic Liberation Front, formed by species that had been conquered by the Zephyrians, sent their own diplomatic mission to Earth. They came not to negotiate with the Zephyrians, but to learn from the humans who had somehow accomplished the impossible. The secret they discovered was deceptively simple. Humans had looked at beings who presented themselves as monsters and had chosen to see people instead. They had responded to aggression with curiosity, to threats with hospitality, and to fear with friendship. It was a technique that proved universally effective. The same approach that had transformed the Zephyrians soon began healing ancient wounds across the galaxy. Species that had been enemies for generations found themselves working together on projects that would have been unthinkable just years before. The humans, meanwhile, gained access to technologies and knowledge that advanced their civilization by centuries in a matter of decades. But more importantly, they gained something that proved even more valuable. The knowledge that their fundamental approach to life, their instinctive belief that differences could be celebrated rather than feared, was not a weakness, but humanity's greatest strength. Dr. Sarah Chen, now serving as Earth's first galactic ambassador, often reflected on how close the galaxy had come to a very different outcome. If humanity had responded to the Zephyrian invasion with fear and violence, if they had met aggression with aggression, the result would have been the same cycle of conquest and suffering that had plagued the galaxy for millennia. Instead, they had done something much more difficult and infinitely more powerful. They had chosen to be human. The galaxy's monsters had felt invincible until a human smiled back. And in that smile, they had discovered something that all their weapons and technology could never provide: the possibility of redemption, the chance to become something better than they had ever imagined possible. In the end, humanity's greatest victory was not in conquering their would-be conquerors, but in helping them conquer themselves. The galaxy would never be the same, and that was exactly as it should be. Years later, when alien children across the galaxy learned about the Great Transformation, they always asked the same question: how did the humans know it would work? The answer, inscribed on a plaque outside the United Nations building in both human and Zephyrian script, came from Emma Thompson, now a young woman studying xenocultural relations. "We didn't know it would work. We just knew that being kind was the only thing that felt right. Sometimes the best strategy is just being yourself, especially when yourself happens to be human." And throughout the galaxy, beings who had once been enemies smiled back.